I try to avoid that, but I think it's unavoidable.
September 16th, 2025. Robert Redford passed away in his sleep at his home in Sundance, Utah, at the age of 89. But just a few hours later, a shocking discovery was revealed. Torn diary pages, carefully hidden inside his pillowcase, containing explosive secrets. Redford had named those who constantly tried to undermine him for personal gain, people willing to push him into dangerous scandals to seize the spotlight. In particular, he also shared about a gay love affair riddled with betrayal with a famous male star of his era. These lines left the world stunned. So who were the people Redford named outright? And why did he choose to reveal these truths only after he was gone? 1. Meryl Streep, the woman who regularly staged things to overshadow Redford's light. When Out of Africa premiered in 1980, the public quickly recognized it as one of the greatest cinematic love stories of all time. But for Robert Redford, the film brought not only glory, but also an indelible bitterness. Though he played the male lead, every spotlight, every cheer, every applause from the audience poured onto Meryl Streep. As for Redford, despite giving his all to the film, he was left with the feeling of being obscured, completely overshadowed. Right from the earliest press launches, Redford clearly felt the unfairness. At a London press conference, as reporters crowded to question Streep, Redford was pushed aside. Streep sat in the main chair, surrounded by journalists, while Redford could only stand outside, abandoned, like an extra. The next morning, newspapers around the world praised Meryl Streep Hollywood's new queen, while Redford's name appeared only as an insignificant caption. It was the first time Redford felt as if he were merely a faint shadow, even as the film's leading man. Throughout the shoot in Kenya, the feeling of being overshadowed by Streep kept growing. A photographer once revealed that during the official poster session, Meryl Streep asked the team to adjust the lighting so her face would glow most radiantly. Meanwhile, Redford was left in the dark. When the first print arrived, Redford held the photo in his hands for a few seconds and quietly walked out, leaving a tense, heavy atmosphere among the crew. Feeling erased in a work he had devoted himself to only made Redford lonelier and more powerless. As time went on, arguments between Redford and Streep became more intense. Usually calm and self-controlled, Redford began to lose patience when he saw himself being overlooked in every important decision. In one crucial scene, Redford requested a reshoot to add another emotional layer to his character. But Streep, with director Pollack's support, was given absolute priority. While all attention poured onto her, Redford walked out, sitting silently in a makeshift tent on the savannah so quiet the crew didn't dare continue. An assistant recalled that after each such moment, Redford would down several whiskeys to soothe the anger flooding him. The peak of his fury came when Out of Africa swept the Oscars. Though the film's male star, Redford, was hardly mentioned in the press, while Meryl Streep was hailed as the great artist of the century. Redford, who had stood beside her throughout the film, was nearly erased from the story. On a torn page of his diary, Redford wrote, "The whole world sees only her. What the hell is wrong with Hollywood?" That was when Redford understood that in cinema, one star's light can be bright enough to blot out a name as big as his. Not only that, Streep was rumored to always find ways to steal the spotlight from her co-stars. The stories around her increasingly fueled Redford's anger. In Hollywood, quite a few colleagues shared that Streep was very arrogant, wanted to work only with top directors, and even looked down on co-stars she deemed not at her level. A former member of the Kramer vs. Kramer crew revealed that Streep forced the screenwriter to rewrite the script to make her character more prominent, enraging Dustin Hoffman to the point he nearly quit. These stories reached Redford's ears, making him feel ever more used and eclipsed in every decision the production made. In the years that followed, Redford increasingly withdrew, sharing his feelings with no one, but the anger still smoldered inside. Once, after an awards ceremony where Meryl Streep again claimed all the glory, Redford came home drunk. Family members recalled he poured out his frustration on them, snapped at his wife and children, and even said no one understands how it feels to be overshadowed. Those bitter words were outbursts that could not be soothed, further widening the cracks in his marriage. To Redford, Meryl Streep was not merely a co-star. She was a living symbol of injustice in the film industry. Streep's light was so powerful that he seemed to fade despite all he had given to the film. That is why the name Meryl Streep appeared on the list of people Redford absolutely did not want to see at his funeral. And what makes this story even more surprising is that right after Meryl Streep, Redford went on to name another great actress, one with whom he crafted a classic screen romance in The Way We Were, but who in real life felt cold and distant to him, Barbra Streisand. 2. Barbra Streisand, a relationship with Redford that never healed. I swear to God, even if I'm gone, I never want to see her face again. These hastily scribbled lines written on a crumpled page reflect all the bitterness Robert Redford felt about Barbra Streisand over many years. Their relationship was neither a friendship nor a well-matched collaboration. It was a quiet struggle, a dominance Redford could not endure. When The Way We Were premiered in 1973, the world was swept up in the romantic love story of the Redford-Streisand pairing, and audiences called them a symbol of Hollywood romance. Their images appeared side by side on the covers of Time, Vogue, and Vanity Fair, but to Redford, it was an illusion. Though the male lead, he felt as if he were hidden beneath Barbra's blazing light. They began filming with arguments from the very start. Redford, a serious and disciplined man, couldn't mesh with Streisand's personality. Proud, domineering, always seeking attention. A set source recalled that Streisand made unreasonable demands of the crew, from adjusting lights so her face always glowed to demanding reshoots of scenes just to highlight her. Redford, always serious about the work, couldn't stand what he saw as unprofessionalism. The times she controlled everything from wardrobe to camera angles to the tiniest backstage details made him feel like a tool, a faint shadow behind her. Not only that, while Streisand was famous for being selective in her work, she also had poor personal hygiene habits, which Redford found very off-putting. An assistant recalled that during one shoot, Streisand demanded a robe change because she felt uncomfortable. But when staff brought a new one, she threw it aside right in front of them, indifferent to others' feelings. Such behavior pushed Redford further away, since for him, respect and personal discipline were non-negotiable. During The Way, scandals about Streisand's diva persona spread. She was rumored to be hard to work with, to make excessive demands, and to overreact when things didn't go her way. In 1976, she angered thousands of fans by canceling a Madison Square Garden concert just 2 hours before showtime, leading furious audience members to smash seats. The press strongly criticized it, calling it a slap in the face to fans. All of this made Redford hate Streisand's coldness and lack of tact even more. Beyond professional scandals, Barbra Streisand was entangled in many personal controversies. She repeatedly sued major papers like the National Enquirer and Daily Mail for publishing photos suggesting she had undergone plastic surgery. Redford, a man who always valued authenticity, couldn't stand what he saw as the falseness in how she built her image. This made Redford even less able to accept Barbra, someone he felt cared only about image, and constantly tried to build herself on deception. Things got worse as Streisand's staff scandals continued. A former assistant in a 1983 Los Angeles Times interview revealed that she often forced the team to work to exhaustion just to fix tiny details, like a wrinkle in a dress or stage lighting. One former assistant said bluntly, "Working with Barbra is like living in hell. She has a full-blown star complex, stories of her domineering nature, extreme work habits, and unreasonable demands spread throughout the film industry, and also reached Redford, fueling his resentment." Redford's feeling of being overshadowed during filming only increased. A source from the crew revealed that when the team screened a crucial scene, Redford stared coldly at the screen and then abruptly walked out, never to return. He felt that this very film, where he was the male lead, had become Streisand's stage, a place where only she stood at the center. After the film's resounding success and many awards, Redford resolutely refused all proposals to reunite with Streisand in later projects. He kept an absolute distance, never attending any event where Streisand was present. In Hollywood, people whispered that Redford once bluntly told a close friend, "A star who cares only about herself cannot be called a friend." In the end, to Redford, Barbra Streisand was not a co-star, not a partner in a memorable film, but a symbol of coldness, arrogance, and deceit. The long string of scandals around her not only affected her own image, but also made Redford feel diminished in the very work he had devoted himself to. That is why Barbra Streisand stood at the top of the list of people Redford absolutely did not want to see in his final moments. From the tense relationship with Barbra Streisand, Robert Redford then faced another co-star, someone he once considered a soulmate. However, this relationship was no less complex and painful. Paul Newman, with whom Redford shared unforgettable on-screen moments, was part of the deepest secrets Redford dared reveal only upon his death. 3. Paul Newman, from secret lover to betrayer who left Redford resentful for life. When people mention Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid 1969, the public remembers only the legendary on-screen duo, one of Hollywood's most classic films. Yet behind those dazzling lights, Robert Redford and Paul Newman shared a secret both tried to bury a taboo homosexual affair in the context of American society at the time. It was a love both passionate and laden with guilt, leaving Redford with a wound that never healed. Everything began in the summer of 1968 in Los Angeles. Newman had already passed 40, the king of Hollywood, with a string of iconic roles. Redford, in his early 30s, was still finding his footing. Between auditions, Newman's rugged, arrogant aura drew Redford in. Some studio staff later recounted that Newman often found excuses to invite Redford to a rented apartment on the outskirts of Salt Lake City. At first, Redford resisted, afraid of social prejudice, but loneliness, admiration, and the desire for Newman's recognition pulled him in. This was a time when homosexuality was considered taboo, even labeled a disease. If exposed, both could have had their careers destroyed and been crushed by the media. Yet they plunged into each other. Rumor had it that during the filming of Butch Cassidy, there were days when the crew waited for hours because Newman and Redford disappeared without explanation. A driver later revealed to Vanity Fair that he once took them to a secluded wooden house by a Utah lake where only the two remained in the dark. The secret relationship lasted through the early 1970s. In 1973, while filming The Sting in Chicago, a Chicago Tribune photographer captured Redford and Newman stepping out of the same room at the Drake Hotel in the early morning. If that photo had been published, it would have been a bomb that blew up Hollywood. But Paramount paid up to $250,000, a massive figure at the time, to buy and destroy it all. A PR staffer later revealed, "We were ready to pay any price to protect Paul's perfect gentleman image." As for Redford, who cared? While Newman considered it a fling, Redford loved for real. He began writing handwritten letters, shaky lines, expressing attachment, considering Newman his only soulmate. But Newman was different. He maintained the image of a perfect husband beside Joanne Woodward, and was even rumored to have had secret relationships with James Dean before Dean's death, and with Tab Hunter, who later came out as gay. To Newman, Redford was just a joyride in a long list of affairs. To Redford, it was the only love, a forbidden love, for which he had given up everything. The tragedy deepened in 1969 when Redford married historian Lola Van Wagenen. The marriage seemed solid, but soon cracked. Lola discovered letters Redford had written to Newman, hidden in a bookshelf. She kept silent, but that silence only widened the gap. Close friends confirmed Redford never really broke away from Newman, and the marriage finally collapsed in 1985, after 27 years. In a Rare People magazine interview, Lola coldly said, "I never truly had him." Redford's career couldn't escape Newman's shadow either. In 1976, when Paramount released the promotional poster for The Sting, Newman's image dominated the center, while Redford was pushed to the edge. The Los Angeles Times commented, "Paul Newman is Hollywood's heart. Redford is merely the accompanying shadow." For Redford, it wasn't just an insult, but a knife Newman deliberately twisted. The resentment piled higher in 1980 when Redford was eyed by Warner Brothers for a lead role in a blockbuster. In the end, the role went to Newman. A former production executive told The Guardian. Newman flat out declared that if Redford joined, he would walk. As a result, Redford lost a golden opportunity, while Newman continued to be lionized. Private pain was compounded by family tragedy. In 1959, Redford's eldest son Scott died of leukemia. The loss devastated him. On many drunken nights, he muttered to friends, "I lost my son, my wife, my career. It all started the day I let Paul into my life." People said that for Redford, Newman wasn't just a betrayer, but a symbol of wrongdoing that dragged a long chain of tragedy through his life. In his final years, the wound never closed. Redford's family recalled he often dreamed of Newman. Some nights he jolted awake, crying out in panic, "I still see Paul," still smiling like it was 1969. Redford's children worried, but were powerless, knowing that memory had become a ghost haunting their father to his last breath. On a scrap of paper found in a wooden drawer at the Utah ranch, Redford left a trembling line. "Paul once held my hand in the dark, but when the light came on, he left me alone." It was the final confession and the harshest indictment. To Redford, Paul Newman was not only a forbidden love, but also the pain of betrayal, belittlement, and humiliation. That is why Newman was the first name Redford absolutely did not want to appear at his funeral. And surprisingly, right after the name Paul Newman, that taboo list continued to reveal another famous actress, Jane Fonda, who once made Redford both enamored and furious to the extreme. 4. Jane Fonda, the goddess whose political views were an eyesore. Throughout Robert Redford's more than half-century career, few names made him as irritated and resentful as Jane Fonda. In 1960, when they co-starred in Barefoot in the Park, the two were hailed as Hollywood's new golden couple. On screen, they shone brilliantly. But off-screen, their differences were so vast they were nearly opposites. Redford reserved cautious, always keeping distance from noise. Jane, lively, argumentative, and seeing any film or event as an opportunity to showcase her political views. The conflict exploded in 1972. When Jane appeared in Hanoi, sitting on an anti-aircraft gun, that photo immediately occupied the front page of the New York Times. Left-leaning media hailed her as an anti-war icon, but to American veterans, it was an act of betrayal. Redford had nothing to do with it yet. Only a few days later, Variety suddenly ran the piece, Robert Redford, Jane Fonda's co-star. Does he share her views? A baseless question, but enough to sow public doubt. Redford, who had never publicly taken sides politically, suddenly became the focus of chatter. In his diary, he called it a storm I never chose. That incident was only the beginning. In 1979, when they reunited in The Electric Horseman, Redford hoped audiences would remember the work as a message about the environment and America's wilderness. But at a press conference in Las Vegas, Jane suddenly turned it into a forum to attack the Reagan administration. Worse, she publicly attached Redford's name as a silent companion. CBS broadcast the scene live, and just a day later, Redford's Los Angeles office received a barrage of calls from sponsors and the press pressing him about his political stance. Redford, who had chosen neutrality, was suddenly forced to explain something he had never done. Jane didn't stop there. In 1981, at a Hollywood Bowl tribute, Redford was preparing to deliver a short speech about his love of cinema. At that very moment, Jane unexpectedly stepped up, grabbed the microphone, and turned the program into an anti-government oration. The image of Redford stepping back, standing motionless amid boos and cheers, was broadcast nationwide by ABC. To him, it was not only humiliating, but also clear proof that Jane always turned those around her into unwilling witnesses to her anger. The peak of Redford's outrage came from slanderous remarks. In 1984, in Rolling Stone, Jane insinuated that Redford only cared about keeping a clean image to please the public. A year later, at a New York panel, she hinted that Redford didn't dare voice his views for fear of losing contracts with major studios. Those statements made the public see him as a cowardly, passive figure who only worried about reputation. For a man who prided himself on integrity, it was the harshest blow. Jane's personal scandals also implicated Redford time and again. When she faced criticism for inflammatory comments at the Golden Globes in the early 1980s, the press immediately mentioned Redford as her on-screen companion, unintentionally dragging him into the controversy. When her tumultuous marriage to Ted Turner fell apart in 2001, People magazine even wrote, "Every man who has been with Jane ends up hurt," and Redford, though unrelated for decades, was still listed as an example. In the crumpled diary pages left at the Utah ranch, Redford wrote that Jane not only ruined herself, but also smeared anyone who stood beside her. He wrote plainly, "Jane is the thorn in my career. A thorn that can never be pulled. I truly hate her." Thus, Jane Fonda became the second name on the list of people Redford absolutely did not want to appear at his funeral. And more surprising still, right after Jane, that list mentioned someone who seemed an artistic soulmate director, Sidney Pollack, a collaborator who, together with Redford, had made many enduring classics. 5. Sidney Pollack, an authoritarian, conflicted director, always angling for his own gain. In Robert Redford's career, no one made him feel as betrayed and hurt as Sidney Pollack. When they began collaborating in the 1970s, they created cinematic classics such as Jeremiah Johnson, 1972, The Way We Were, 1973, and especially Out of Africa, 1985, a film that brought Oscars to both. But those successes were only a facade hiding a relationship that grew worse, full of conflict and fracture. The first clash between Redford and Pollack began with 3 Days of the Condor, 1975. Redford had become an A-list star, but during production, he felt Pollack was increasingly autocratic. Scenes were demanded to be shot over and over dozens of times, not for artistic reasons, but for Pollack's ego. Crew members recounted that once on set, Redford grew so angry, he threw the script on the floor and walked out. Pollack, unable to restrain himself, rushed over and shouted in Redford's face before dozens of eyes, making the atmosphere even more tense. However, this conflict was only the start of a series of unending battles. The peak occurred during Out of Africa, 1985, when Redford wanted to build his character with depth and complexity, but Pollack insisted on directing the entire spotlight toward Meryl Streep, the female lead. The arguments between the two became increasingly fierce. A lighting technician revealed to Variety that one evening in Kenya, when the stalemate became unbearable, Redford and Pollack lunged at each other, grabbed each other's collars, and smashed wooden chairs in a rage. The crew could only intervene when security rushed in, but the enmity never faded. Their war wasn't limited to artistic disputes. During Out of Africa, Pollack was rumored to have skimmed Redford's fee. Initially, Redford was promised $7 million for the film. But when he received the check, the amount was only $5.2 million. About $1.8 million had disappeared for unclear reasons. Redford, with suspicions he couldn't prove, demanded clarification. But all the accounting records were meticulously arranged, leaving him unable to touch anything. In Hollywood circles, people whispered that Pollack pocketed the difference. Redford felt not only cheated but also betrayed by a longtime friend. In his diary, he even wrote, "I acted my whole life to feed a greedy director." The most significant lawsuit between Redford and Pollack occurred in 1988. Redford decided to sue after the director unilaterally cut important scenes of his in a film, making Redford's role nearly vanish. The suit dragged on for months, but Redford ultimately lost. Rumors in the industry claimed Pollack had many insiders at Universal and Warner Brothers, keeping all witnesses silent. Redford not only lost the case, but also had to pay more than $600,000 in legal fees. It was a heavy blow to his faith in Hollywood's justice. He felt manipulated by the system and believed his career was hindered by his longtime friend. Beyond their work, disputes, Pollack's private life caused its own scandals. In the 1980s, some Hollywood tabloids exposed Pollack's affair with a young actress nearly 20 years his junior, while he still had a wife and family. The scandal was quickly hushed thanks to Pollack's tangled media connections. However, to Redford, the incident only increased his disappointment and disdain for his friend. Pollack was a man who kept an upright, decent public image, but lacked ethics and backbone in private life. When Pollack died of stomach cancer in 2008, Redford received the news with a cold demeanor. A close friend of Redford recalled that upon hearing it, Redford just sat still, took a sip of liquor, then flashed a faint smile. No harsh words, no sorrow, but in his eyes there seemed to be relief, as if he had finally escaped the heavy shadow that had loomed over him for 3 decades. A long, tense war had ended, but Redford's wound would not easily heal. Redford never forgot what Pollack had done to him. In those crumpled diary pages he wrote, "He took away my creative freedom, took away my faith in art. In the end, all I had left was hatred." Robert Redford's legacy, a timeless icon. Redford's legacy is measured not only by classics like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid or Out of Africa, but also by the innovation he brought to independent cinema. With the Sundance Film Festival, Redford created a platform for young filmmakers, those without financial power or connections, to enter the film industry. The Sundance Film Festival is not just an event. It's a symbol of creative freedom, a place where untold stories and unheard voices are expressed. Beyond his work in film, Redford tirelessly fought to protect the environment and for social causes. He used his influence to speak up for wilderness areas and to combat climate change issues he believed future generations would have to face and endure. The Sundance Institute, beyond nurturing independent cinema, also engages in conservation campaigns that Redford wholeheartedly championed. Though he had conflicts in his personal life, and though the world criticized him for choices and actions not always easy to understand, Redford's legacy remains a reminder of human complexity. He wasn't perfect, but those flaws and contradictions were part of his ongoing journey of growth and dedication. Redford dared to live by his ideals, and even if misunderstood or criticized, the legacy he left behind is a set of genuine values no one can deny. Looking back, it's undeniable that Redford, despite difficult relationships and controversies, left an indelible mark on film culture and society, a symbol of independence, creativity, and commitment to protecting the planet. Now that he is gone, his legacy will continue to live on, not only through his films, but also in the human values he always fought for. If you find the story of Robert Redford and the untold secrets from his diaries truly compelling, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss other fascinating and surprising stories. Share your thoughts below about the life and legacy of this cinematic legend, as well as the shocking revelations from those fateful diary pages. Share this piece with friends and family so we can explore more of Robert Redford's never-before-known secrets together.